Alright, so I almost feel like I should issue a trigger warning before we get into this video because it might be a little bit painful to watch. Hillary Clinton, the ghoul of all ghouls, went on Rachel Maddow's show on MSNBC to basically do what seems to be the go-to strategy for Democrats when things are not looking too hot for them, and that is blame the American people, blame their constituents, and blame the voters for not voting hard enough in order to give them more power to actually do the things that they are constantly promising people and failing to deliver on. So let's go ahead and listen to Hillary Rodham Clinton scold the American people for Democrats' failures.
You know, democracy is messy. You know, a lot of people got, I think, kind of frustrated looking at the messy process of legislation. And they didn't really appreciate that within a year, the Biden administration has passed two major pieces of legislation through both the House and the Senate. They've passed another major piece through the House that will soon be in the Senate. By any measure, those are extraordinary accomplishments, and they really will help many millions of Americans with health care and prescription drug prices, as well as climate change and so much else. But because of the way we are getting our information today, and because of the lack of gatekeepers and people who have a historic perspective, who can help us understand what we are seeing, there is a real vulnerability in the electorate to the kind of demagoguery and disinformation that, unfortunately, the other side is really good at exploiting.
Okay, so you see that her main contention there, right? She says at the beginning of that clip, you know, politics is messy, right? It's just messy. People don't understand the inner workings of how our Congress, how our government is actually functioning. But, you know, I know that it's frustrating for people outside the system, but don't worry. Even though no legislation ever ends up helping average Americans in this country, don't worry. The system is working perfectly. It is running smoothly. You guys are just, I don't know, you're misinformed. You're too stupid to recognize the great grand accomplishments that the Biden administration has already implemented. So she was really talking about three different bills there, right? She was talking about the American Rescue Plan, which was the first bill that was passed early at the beginning of the Biden administration, which had some good things in it, right? It had the child tax credit. It had the $1,400 checks, which should have been $2,000 checks as were promised, but they sent out the $1,400 checks. That helped millions of people barely be able to keep a roof over their head, be able to go to the grocery store and afford to feed their families temporarily. But those were one-shot hit of adrenaline. That was a one-shot hit of adrenaline, just like everything else that has come out of the Biden administration, and people don't feel that anymore. Okay, it happened all the way at the beginning of the year in when Biden was first taking office. Okay, that $1,400, I don't know, how much they think this is worth, but yeah, people are going to forget about that after almost a year after it goes out. Okay, you should have done the monthly $2,000 checks. That's what people wanted. You chose not to do that. But here's Hillary Clinton basically saying, no, keep feeding off of those crumbs that we gave you almost a year ago in that first bill. And then she talks about the other two bills, the things that we have been covering extensively on this channel, right? She talks about, she's referencing the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill and the Buildback Better Bill. Well, let's just go ahead and take a look at exactly what those grand accomplishments actually were, okay? So just as a reminder, and I covered this in a different video recently, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, okay? This is what was initially promised, right? So when she says the American people, you're just not seeing the accomplishments of the Biden administration. And these bills, they were really substantive, and they were going to actually help materially improve the lives of the American people. Now, none of that is actually true, right? This is what we started out with on the bipartisan infrastructure framework, okay? It looked pretty good at the time, even though this in and of itself would not have been enough to even get our infrastructure up to a grade of a B+, according to what the American Society of Civil Engineers estimates that we need. Still, it would have been $2.6 billion over 10 years. It would have been something, okay? It would have been something pretty good that they could have gotten passed. Now, this is what bipartisanship gets you, okay? This is what Joe Biden's incessant demand to work with Republicans actually resulted in. It resulted in this going to this, okay? So not only just not really even left with crumbs, I don't even know if you could really in good faith call these crumbs, because most of this is just going to be a privatization scheme. Most of this is just going to end up being a handout to corporate America, and this is not going to be something that the American people actually feel materially improves their lives. I mean, we're talking about $550 billion over 10 years in new investments in our completely broken and dysfunctional infrastructure that we have here in the United States, okay? People are not going to feel this, right? right? You're talking about absolute crumbs, if you can even call it that. Then you look at what else was taken out of the other bill, right? The Buildback Better bill, which as of right now, as we're going to get to, is not even a guarantee to pass at all, let alone in its current already completely gutted and watered down form that it is in right now. So what's not included? What did they take out of the Buildback Better social spending bill that Joe Biden is fighting for right now? Or I shouldn't even say fighting for, because he's not fighting for absolutely jack shit. But notably, paid leave is not part of the bill. That was one of the most popular portions of it. Democrats initially wanted to include 12 weeks of guaranteed paid family and medical leave for every U.S. worker. Now there's absolutely nothing on that front. Medicare, dental, and vision benefits, also some of the most popular and most important bills that the American people wanted to be included in this. Those have been completely taken out. So Medicare, dental, and vision left out, as well as Medicare negotiating drug prices. This was the single top issue for the American people, and also the thing that had the most bipartisan support amongst the American people. So it's like they claim that they are doing this effective bipartisanship within Congress. Meanwhile, they are just doing a bipartisan coalition of corruption. That's what it really is, right? She says politics is messy. It's just complicated. No, it's not. It's just corrupt, okay? It's just that our system is not capable of functioning as a democracy, because it is not a democracy. Because corporate America has bought and controlled and are puppeteering every single politician that is operating within the establishments of both the Democratic and the Republican Party, including people like Hillary Clinton, which is why she herself was massively unpopular and lost to a guy who was probably the most obvious con man of all time in Donald Trump. Okay, so she doesn't really have any place, any area to be grandstanding from, to be lecturing the American people on why Democrats are failing. She is the epitome of why the Democratic Party is currently failing. It's because people hate your brand of establishment elitist politics, where you are constantly talking down to them instead of just trying to, actually follow through on some of the things that you say that you are going to pass for the American people. But we continue here. Free college was also cut out from this bill. They also nixed the billionaires tax, which would have literally only affected like 700 people in this country. Still, they couldn't get that passed. That's how bought and controlled by the billionaire class the Democratic Party actually is. And the details were unveiled Wednesday, and this could have taxed the unrealized gains of, again, assets around 700 of the richest taxpayers. So listen, if you can't pass that, then what are the American people supposed to believe, right? If you promise so many big, bold things, Joe Biden runs on the $15 minimum wage. He runs on the public option. Have we heard a single goddamn thing about that in months? No, he completely gave up on the $15 minimum wage when the Senate parliamentarian decided, I am God and you guys can't do anything that I don't want you to do. He completely bailed on that fight the second that there was any even mild a curb that got in his way on that fight. Then you talk about all of these other important popular policies that were within his bill that the American people overwhelmingly supported, and he completely guts that out while slapping something like this into the bill. Okay, I've talked about this multiple times on this channel already, but the second most expensive portion of the Build Back Better agenda that is left of whatever the Build Back Better agenda currently is in its current form, the second most expensive portion of this, as they are currently telling people, we can't afford free community college. We can't afford to have Medicare negotiate drug prices, even though that would save hundreds of millions of dollars, okay? We can't afford to give paid family leave. As they are telling everybody, we can't afford this, we can't afford that, we can't afford to materially help the American people. The second most expensive part of the bill is a tax cut for millionaires and billionaires, okay? How do you fucking justify this to the American people? How do you do something like this, completely eviscerate your own agenda, let members of your own party eviscerate your entire agenda with no pushback whatsoever, then give tax cuts to millionaires in the same exact way that the Republican Party would be doing if they were in power now, and then expect people to be able to distinguish between what you stand for and what Republicans stand for? There is almost no difference. I mean, we're talking about differences on the margins. Republicans at least are open and brazen with the evil nature of what they actually stand for. Okay, Democrats are a little bit more coveted, right? They're a little bit more, they put, a little facade on to pretend as if they actually care about working class Americans. And meanwhile, their agenda says otherwise, okay? And people are not that dumb, okay? People can see through the bullshit when this is the type of stuff that you are pulling. And again, not only were all of the most important and popular portions of this bill taken out, not only did they make the second most expensive part of this bill a tax cut for millionaires, but we don't even know it's going to pass at all. Okay, so Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, they're still standing in the way of the Build Back Better Act. So, one of these achievements that Hillary Clinton is going out there and bragging about, there is absolutely no guarantee whatsoever is going to get passed at all, let alone in its current completely gutted and watered down and eviscerated form. So, all of this adds up to the same picture. Democrats don't stand for anything, okay? And the American people are starting to take notice of that. You see here, the Democratic brand is broken. The infrastructure bill isn't fixing it. Well, no shit. We just looked at the infrastructure bill. How is this going to fix it? How can you even call this a brand, okay? This is not a brand. This is just telling the American people, look, we can get a corrupt bipartisan coalition together to do absolutely nothing for you. Okay, we can get two sides of a massively corrupted aisle to get together to do nothing for you and to give handouts to corporate America yet again, okay? And they think that this is somehow going to build an effective brand for them. It's just completely ridiculous. But here are some of the details they say here from David Siders. In the days after the Democratic Party's collapse in the Virginia governor's race, party strategists descended on the Commonwealth to figure out what went wrong and understand just how bad the national outlook might be next year. So keep in mind, this guy, Terry McAuliffe, he lost to Greg Youngkin in Virginia. He was running on nothing. He was running on anti-Trumpism in an election that didn't have Donald Trump in it, okay? I wonder why that didn't work. They were literally sending out pro-Trump endorsement mailers to voters, okay? They were doing the advertising for the Republican Party, and they are literally like, well, we don't know why people don't understand what we stand for. Well, because you're not telling them anything. You're just saying we're not as bad as the other guys, okay? It's not a convincing message, but they continue here saying that what they discovered, largely through focus groups and polling, was even worse than expected. The problems cut far deeper than the failings of their gubernatorial nominee, Terry McAuliffe, or Joe Biden's flagging approval ratings. Rather, the Democratic Party's entire brand was a wreck. Voters couldn't name anything that the Democrats had done, except a few who said that we passed the infrastructure bill, the center-left group Third Way and its pollsters found. And most of the voters Third Way spoke with in suburban Virginia focus groups, according to the report, could not articulate what Democrats stand for. They also could not say what they were doing in Washington besides fighting. Okay, so listen. This is everything that we have been saying for months and months, if not years and years and years, okay? It's the same goddamn message that we saw when Hillary Clinton was running in 2016, okay? You see here, this is an article from September 23rd, 2016, here from Pew Research Center, okay? They say, ahead of the debates between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, many voters don't know much about where Trump or Clinton stand on the major issues, okay? So this is the problem, okay? People like Bernie Sanders, who are much more popular and had much higher favorability ratings than people like Hillary Clinton, the reason for that is that Bernie Sanders is not a Bernie Sanders brand, right? When Hillary Clinton ran, she ran on, I'm going to be the first female president. I am not as bad as Donald Trump. I am going to be the establishment figure that's going to keep everybody, calm throughout this process, right? Okay, that's what she was running on. That's not a brand. People don't give a shit about you, okay? This is why Bernie Sanders ran both of his campaigns on not me, us, and similar slogans like that to make the fight about the actual policies, to make the fight about directly materially improving the lives of average Americans. That's why if you go and ask people, what does Bernie Sanders stand for? They know what he stands for, okay? They'll say Medicare for all. They'll say a $15 minimum wage. They'll say legalizing marijuana. They'll say all of the flagship issues that he incessantly talks about and has been talking about for his entire goddamn life, okay? That's how you build a brand. You build a brand, okay, by actually just doing what the American people want you to do, okay? I know that this is like crazy and radical and complicated in the minds of somebody like Hillary Clinton as to like, how do we figure out this complex block of voters? It's not complicated, okay? As she said at the beginning of that clip, she says, politics is messy. Again, politics is not messy if you're not corrupt, okay? Politics is actually really easy if you're not corrupt and you just represent what your constituency wants you to do. It only gets corrupt when you start taking bribes from corporate America who want you to do things that are the complete antithesis of what the overwhelming majority of your constituents want from you, okay? That's when it gets messy. That's when it gets complicated, is because then you have to go and justify why you're doing things that are massively unpopular and why you're not able to do things that people overwhelmingly want you to do, okay? That's when politics gets messy. That's when politics gets complicated, but that is not a necessary part of all of this, okay? If you wanted to build an actual brand, take a lesson from the first bill that she referenced in that entire clip, right? She says two things. So here from Silo Kapoor, right? She was bringing up, how the Democratic Party doesn't have an effective brand, right? Look at where Biden's approval rating was after he sent out the $1,400 checks. That's when he peaked, okay? The peak of Biden's popularity is when he sent out those checks, okay? Now he's starting to dip off because people are no longer materially feeling the things that he was giving out to them, even though they were crumbs, and they're sitting and throwing their hands up, and they can't figure out what the fuck that they could do to win back support for Biden. It's not complicated, okay? He could do things by executive order. He could legalize marijuana tomorrow. He could free all nonviolent drug offenders. He could extend Medicare to cover everybody during the COVID pandemic. There are so many different things that Biden could do with the stroke of a pen, or that he could actually join the fight in trying to get passed through Congress through that means, okay? So there are so many different things that Democrats could be doing, but again, they are choosing to go with the time-honored tradition of simply blaming the voters and saying, you guys are just not appreciative of what we have been doing for you throughout this entire complicated and messy political process.